Now, we're starting a new lesson. And it's entitled Forever Yours. Equally, equally fitting, equally important as well as the last lesson. Because without any guardrails in your life with this lesson today, the results may be a little bit damaging, a little bit important in such a way. All right? So in this lesson, let us learn and unravel what God has in store for us in terms of guarding our marriage, protecting yourself for marriage, and protecting yourself from married people. It's very important. Let me start by defining this word, fidelity. This word came to the English by way of the French in the 15th century, from the Latin word fidelis, so which means faithful, loyal, trustworthy. In other words, like allegiance, piety, devotion. This word means like faithfulness to something to which one is bound by pledge or duty, like marriage. Right? So marriage by its grand design, as in Genesis chapter 2, verse 24, it says there that a man shall leave his father and his mother, be joined to his wife, all right? The two shall become one flesh. That's fidelity. So that's the Old Testament. But you would notice when when Jesus was ministering during his time, one of the Pharisees asked him regarding divorce. He challenged him. There's a question down there. What can you tell about divorce? And Jesus quoting the same verse. And he added one thing. Let God has joined together, let no man separate. That's how important this lesson is. That fidelity is something that when we don't guard, when we don't put certain guardrails, results will be damaging. But the problem is some fall into the pit and some cross over the guardrails and just go overboard. And that's the reason of this. If you would notice globally, from the 1960s up to this year, divorce rate is increasing up to 48% of those married today has filed divorce. When I was reading this article, in one of those countries where divorce is very prevalent, 5 out of 1,000 people is divorced or getting divorced. That's how prevalent it is. And just asking what should be the reasons of these divorces. If you would notice, see, top on the tree is infidelity. Infidelity is one of those top reasons. If you notice, next on the line is marrying too young or lack of preparation of marriage. The other reasons like lack of commitment, excessive arguing, I don't know, probably is the reason of one of those. One of them is doing some unpleasant things in the relationship already. So this clearly supports how important this lesson that we are trying to embark right now. Stuck in the middle of the study for us to make sure that we are safely guarded in our hearts. These statistics doesn't only involve those people that are living like us, probably like middle-income people. But you would see people fall from grace. Great leaders fall from grace because of infidelity. We have seen news of people that we look forward to as those who have been practicing good moral values fall into grace. People from the church, leaders from the church itself, fall from grace because of infidelity. Such is the case of our conversation today. And I would like to introduce to you King David. King David, the man after God's own heart. In 1 Samuel 16, we know that he has been chosen and anointed by God. How he became anointed, alam po natin yung story when all the siblings, all the sons of Jesse was paraded in front of Samuel. But yet God has chosen David to be his next king of Israel. Being that brave young boy, a great warrior, slayed Goliath. Such a great mighty warrior. United Saul's reign, the warrior of Saul. If you would read the First Kings and the Samuel, Saul killed 1,000, David killed 10,000. That's how great this guy is. Until the day that he was anointed to be the unifier of Judah and the entire Israel. His kingdom was fixed in 2 Samuel chapter 5 when he was really anointed as the king of entire Israel. Even all of these accomplishments, David succumbed to a pitfall, made some mistakes, made some errors, made some compromises. And this allowed me to entitle this conversation that we have as Royal Conspiracy. I'll be taking this conversation from 2 Samuel chapter 11 and 12. Right, the books of Samuel, if you would read books of 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel, you would see the descriptions of how a king should be. King Saul was described as the very negative one. You can see all the negative values of a king was described for Samuel. But for David, the man after God's own heart, all the types of how to be a king, how to rule a kingdom was given to be the example for David. However, in the next few chapters that we can see a shocking revelation of how David is capable of these actions. How he fall from grace, threatening not only his kingdom, but his family and his life as well. So we can see that even the man after God's own heart is capable of dark behavior. See the irony on that? The man after God's own heart is capable of a dark behavior. So after reading through these chapters, we can say that if only, the guardrail, if only David has installed those guardrails, probably the story has been continuously of all the accolades, of all the battles, of all the wars that he have gone through. If only. Let us go together and learn from the narrative how, if only, David has placed those guardrails. If there's one thing that I would like you to take home today is this. Living a life full of compromises will lead to bad consequences. Compromises. Let me define compromises as to make a shameful or disreputable, disgraceful concession, deal, or act. That's how I define compromises there. So when someone of high stature or someone who have respect fall into grace, fall into gross sin, all along we thought, probably just one simple mistake, just one temptation from his life that he cannot resist. No, it's not. David allowed some compromises take over his life. And the consequences was very, very bad. One mistake led to another, to a cover-up. The cover-up, led to a murder of his own trusted men. A murder of almost a few soldiers that he has trusted with his life from the wars that they have gone through. Okay. More often than not, these consequences are irreparable. Yes, we can see later on during the narrative how David has confessed of all of his sins. But the damages, the consequences are irreparable. Something that he himself has given it to the Lord. Let's go to 2 Samuel chapter 11. In verse 1, it says, in the spring of the year, when the kings normally go out for war, David sent Joab is one of his generals, and the entire Israelite army to fight the Ammonites. All right? They destroyed the Ammonite army and laid siege to the city of Rabbah. However, David stayed behind in Jerusalem. In this context, why spring? Because usually spring is after the rainy season in the Middle East, where the conditions of the roads are good for traveling with your entire army, with your horses, with your entire food. Right? So that they choose usually spring. So parang if I go to war to a certain city, I would say, okay, let's go to war during spring. And this is usually when, during the ancient times, this is how they go to war. If you ask me of the reason why David stayed behind, the Bible was silent of the reason. You would notice, even on the next preceding verses, it doesn't tell you why David stayed behind. All right? Let's just probably speculate. Let's try to put some Sabi nga, some put some phrases into this, if you allow me to put some phrases there. Probably, if David could have joined them, would the next verses could have happened? If only, right? So, if only, right, David could have just been focused on his task to be the army, the general of his army, could the next verses be happening? Similarly in our lives, if only I could have been focused on my task that was asked me to do, no? Probably I didn't cross the guardrail. If only I obeyed my parents. Ayan yung mga, sa ating mga kids. If only I obeyed my parents. Probably, right? In your idle time, what are you doing? Those are critical items, but we can only speculate because we don't know. But you know the story later on. If he could have stayed, if he could have gone together with his army, probably the narrative could have gone the other way. And this is what happened because he stayed. Late one afternoon, after his midday rest, David got out of bed and was walking on the roof of the palace. As he looked out over the city and noticed a woman unusual beauty taking a bath. All right, the palace could have been a little bit higher because I can see the city. Right? But it couldn't be very high that I could see a woman taking a bath. I think in my imagination, if I'm imagining the palace, it could be like in a little bit of a hill overlooking the city, but not too high that I can see people down below. And he noticed a beautiful woman. Okay, let's stop here. As a while ago, I was talking about compromises. Did David compromise? If we stop here, can you judge that David compromised? He just looked. Now, there's nothing wrong of admiring beautiful women. It's not a sin. People can visually be attracted to the other person and look good. If we stop here, we can judge that David didn't sin anyway. But what happened is the unpleasant thoughts. The unpleasant thoughts was the one that compromises David, or even ourselves. Those are the moments that you remember in hindsight. Probably, what are those thoughts that could have allowed me to sin? Especially when I admire or will look at beautiful people. And this is what happened. He sent someone to find out who she was. And he was told, she is Bathsheba. Take note of this next words. The daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah, the Hittite. Then David sent messengers to get her. And when she came to the palace, he slept with her. That's what happened. That simple admiration becomes an unpleasant thought. But I would like you to take note that the message, when he sent out who she was, the messenger gave these very distinct words. He is the wife of Uriah. Look at that. The messenger didn't omit that this girl is already committed in marriage. But what did David do? You know, during those times, Asian times, kings everyone is subject to the king. He can even ask you anytime to be with her. So we cannot blame Bathsheba over here. But David, the report came to him that this lady that he saw from his midday rest is already committed to marriage, a wife to Uriah. So you would notice that there's also a word Hittite there. If you would notice, the Bible is very clear of making it. Later on, we will learn that word to be very useful of how we reverse David's behavior versus of that of Uriah. The Hittites are, in their religion was very pluralistic. They worship different gods. So if you are familiar with Hittite, this is where almost mentioned a few times in the Bible, where Abraham bought the land for Sarah to bury. It's coming from the Hittites. So they're very, very popular. But during those wars, so David could have conquered them. And Uriah was one of the armies of David right now. He's not just one army. He's one of the 30 his most trusted 30. If you would see like in the army, you have your Navy SEALs. This is Navy SEAL. Uriah is one of that. All right, and then he slept with her. Take note, he slept with her. Later, when Bathsheba discovered that she was pregnant, she sent David a message saying, I'm pregnant, ang bilis. The reason why she is taking a bath is trying to purify herself from menstruation. In in the book of Leviticus, there are given certain laws how to purify yourself out of that monthly period for girls. So therefore, that was not omitted in the narrative because this gives the basic reason why David is the father of what Bathsheba is carrying right now. One, Bathsheba was trying to purify herself from menstruation, meaning it's the very opportune time that probably Bathsheba was very fertile. Okay? And meaning, she just came from menstruation, so it should have been not fathered by Uriah because Uriah is in war. So identically, it is his son. So David has no reason at all just to say that it's not mine. And all of those compromises will lead to bad consequences later on. David allowed those simple cover-ups, those simple look, unpleasant thoughts, coveted Bathsheba, and committed adultery. And later on, we would see what dark behaviors can David still do. So now he's going to a cover-up. He's trying to identify how can I get out of this. So what he did was to send a letter to Joab, asked him to send Uriah home, back to the palace. When he's back in the palace, the usual pleasantries. How's the army doing? As if David doesn't get any news of the war that is coming or the exploits of the war. Ask Uriah, how is Joab doing? How is your entire army doing? Of course, everything is fine. Everything is okay. Then here's the power play of David. He told Uriah, go home and relax. In some Bible scholars would say that on other translations, wash your feet. So in other translations, they may say, scholars are telling that this is like telling Uriah to go home and make love with your wife. This is the power play of David. One of his cover-ups is to make sure, is to have Uriah carry what is in Bathsheba's belly. So go home and relax. David even sent a gift to Uriah after he had left the palace. But Uriah didn't go home. He slept that night at the palace entrance with the king's palace guard. Wow, who is this guy? No? Parang after all the army, after all the battles, the king would summon you from the battle and ask you, just go and relax. But Uriah didn't do that. Of course, that news came to David. And the next day, he asked, what's the matter with you? Of course. Why you didn't go home? After away for so long, you could have missed your wife. Why you didn't go home? But look at the response of Uriah. The ark of the enemies of Israel and Judah are living in tents. And Joab, my master's men, are camping in the open fields. How could I go home to wine, dine and sleep with my wife? I swear that I would never do such a thing. A while ago, I defined who the Hittites are. They're plural, they're pluralistic. But look at the behavior of Uriah down here. See how loyal he is in the ark. See that probably during his time with the Israel, he learned how to love God. And in Deuteronomy chapter 23, there's a law preventing all those inactive soldiers not to have sex with their wives when they are in war. And that's how Uriah understand the law. He followed the law. He was converted to what David is worshiping. And then this is how loyal to his army he is. Because he's one of those trusted men of David. How can I do that with my own men? Me enjoying the company of my wife and the wine, and all my people are probably being slayed down there. No, I will never do such a thing. You would see the difference of behavior of David and Uriah down here. And you would notice how the reverse of a guy, a converted guy, versus you, a man of after God's own heart, devising a scheme that would allow a cover up of what you have done. Okay, he didn't stop there. What David did was to ask him again, that's the next day, ask him to stay in Jerusalem for one more day. This time, another power play from David. What he did was, he got him drunk. Siguro, sabi niya, if I get this guy drunk, probably he'll lose his senses. Probably go home and look at his beautiful wife and probably be attracted again. But what happened? But even that, he couldn't get Uriah to go home to his wife. Again, he slept in the palace entrance with the palace guard. So what a reversible attitude and behavior. The one who is drunk is more pious than the one who is sober. See the difference of what David has done from covering all this up. If I am David, wow, I cannot get this guy to sleep with his wife. What shall I do next? The next morning, David wrote a letter to Joab and gave it to Uriah to deliver. He's asking Uriah to deliver a message of his own death. The letter instructed Joab to station Uriah in the front lines where the battle is fiercest, then pull back so that he could be killed. Look how dark that behavior is. That compromise, he goes extreme to the point to cover up his sin and let his trusted men to be killed. Are we Uriah, who settled with these convictions not to give way to the king's demands to sleep with his wife? Or are we David? Without all those guardrails, we can be on the shoes of David, doing all these dark schemes just to cover up your mistake. Of course, Joab, being the true leader of his army, in the next verses of this, from verse 16, you would know that Joab followed the instruction of David to the letter, sent Uriah to where the fiercest of the battle is, retracted his army so that Uriah will be killed together with some of his men. Then he asked someone to deliver that message to David, saying, we have lost a lot of men from the battle we just came through. And by the way, Uriah was killed in the process. If you would notice from all the Chronicles of Kings, David is very, very, very angry every time he lost people. He lost someone at war. But this time, when that news came to him, as if something, okay, don't worry, we can win the next battle. Because it's part of his scheme. That's why Joab, when he sent the messenger, make sure to mention that Uriah is killed. Because he knows how David is. Losing men in war, David can really walk them out through. But with that mention that Uriah is killed, okay, my scheme went through. So at that time, when the time of mourning was over, meaning morning, he let Bathsheba take the usual mourning. It would take months, or days or months, for them to finish like the time of mourning for her. Then David sent servants and had her brought to his house, and she became his wife. She bore him a son, but the thing that David has done was evil in the sight of the Lord. A conclusion fitting to a king. All along he thought, I succeeded. My scheme succeeded. But it's only a start of God's penalties to him, or God's consequences to him. All along he thought, I'm done. I'm the king, and my plan succeeded. Let's go now to chapter 12. And look at how David was rebuked, how David was faced all those consequences that the Lord has given to him. So chapter 12 starts with how Nathan rebukes the king. How would you rebuke a king? If you go to the king, we have from King Xerxes, right? Just by staying in front of the king, you can just be killed. So months have come by. You would notice from the end of chapter 11, Bathsheba already bore him his son. It probably took some time. But that didn't pass through God's justice. So he sent Nathan. But how would you rebuke a king? So what Nathan did was through a parable. He made it through something that would be very light, and David could probably react in such a way. And he said there was one poor guy and one rich guy. The poor guy take care of a lamb or a ewe, raise it up, probably every day pasture the lamb, treated it as his own daughter, slept with the lamb, together with the lamb, play with the lamb, allow these children to be playing with the lamb. Good parable. Then here's this one rich guy who treated probably just a party, gave a party. Instead of getting his own lamb, he gets the poor man's guy's lamb and slaughtered to be given to the party. Of course, David, hearing that, was very, very upset. Who would do such a thing? He should be punished. And what did Nathan says? You are the man. You are the man who did that. And through that verses, God, through Prophet Nathan, told David that it was I. Remember, David, it was I who chose you, who anointed you. It was I who delivered you from the hand of Saul, who gave you your master's house and your master's wives, gave you the house of Israel and Judah. And if that had been enough, I would have given much, much more. If only. Sometimes you are in this predicament where all along we thought we escaped that simple cover-up, that sin, but we cannot escape the punishment of God, the consequences. Then we will be reminded, what happened? Isn't I who have blessed you? Isn't I who introduced you to this wonderful company that now you are enjoying? I gave you everything, the masters you have. If you have not asked, I could have given much, much more. And then God reminded David through Prophet Nathan that, why then? Why then have you despised the word of the Lord and done this horrible deed? And what are those horrible deeds? Murdered Uriah and taken Uriah's wife, Bathsheba, to be his wife. You would notice that in this instance, David already recalled what he has done, his dark behavior, and confessed immediately to the Lord. Sometimes we lose our grip, we lose our sight. That's why guardrails are here to protect us. In David's case, that simple cover-up, that simple mistake, that simple sin led to the murder of one of his trusted men. It took him time to realize his sin until Nathan rebuked him. God forgave him. He said, I'll spare your life, but those compromises will have bad consequences. He spared David's life. He accepted David's sin, accepted him back to his fold. That's why Psalm 51, if you would read Psalm 51, that's how David cried his heart out, asking God for forgiveness, returning back to God and telling God, I was once lost, but here I am. Accept me again. That's how pitiful David was. But the bad consequences will stay there. And what are those? Tragedy in his own household. Death among his sons. Killing each other. Dishonored and publicly humiliated. What he did in private was done in public. Absalom raped or probably made love with his wife in the same roof, in the eyes of the public. That's how humiliated David was. Dishonored. And of course, in 2 Samuel chapter 12, in the preceding verses, the death of his very firstborn with Bathsheba. You would notice that we cannot escape these consequences. So how important this is in putting guardrails in our own marriage, for us who are singles in preparation for marriage, and for us, everyone in our protection for married people. Cover-ups may happen. Kala natin we escape from it, but the consequences will still there. Irreparable consequences. One would say, temptation. Yeah? What does James says about temptation? Temptation comes from our desires, which entice us and drag us away. These desires give birth to what? To sinful actions. And when sin is allowed, it gives birth to death. A while ago, I said, let's stop at that verse that he looked and noticed. That's temptation. But what happened to David? He allowed that unpleasant thoughts comes to his mind. And it enticed him and drag him away. And that desires gave birth to sinful actions. Coveted Bathsheba, committed adultery, committed murder by sending Uriah to his death. And all of this because of that guardrail that he didn't install in his life. The consequences are very, very fatal. So for us, mga kapatid, how do you usually put guardrails on this, especially in our marriage? Run from sexual sin. No other sin so clearly affects the body as this one does. Immorality. For sexual immorality is a sin against your own body. Don't you realize that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit who lives in you and was given to you by God? You do not belong to yourself, for God bought you with a high price. For you must honor God with your body. For us married people, Hebrews chapter 13, verse 4 says, give honor to marriage and remain faithful to one another in marriage. God will surely judge people who are immoral and those who commit adultery. Let's put some guardrails on that. When we are alone, especially for us, remember our first topic on Billy Graham, when he doesn't want to eat alone with, especially with women. Even with his staff, he always brings along her wife or someone you should know probably to attest that you are not doing something. Let us not jump into a crossover to our guardrails and allow those simple things, eating alone, dining alone with someone that we don't know, or someone that probably might have enticed us outside of our guardrails. Yeah. We know that for a fact that that eating alone, you would say, it's okay. My thoughts are pure. Or how about the other? Probably he may entice you. He may drag you. Right? For our young adults, the letter of Paul to Timothy was very fitting as well. In 2 Timothy chapter 2, it says, run from anything that stimulates your youthful lust. Instead, pursue righteous living, faithfulness, love, and peace. Enjoy the companionship of those who call on the Lord with pure hearts. How is your alone time? Not only for the single adults, but only for us. That simple click, that simple filter. We didn't filter something, then suddenly someone just suddenly waving, beautiful lady waving on that screen, then you click. And don't entertain those youthful lust. Paul knows very well gaano mapusok yung mga pag-iisip ng mga bata. Indeed, it doesn't only for the youth, also for us. How do you spend your time alone? It's very critical. Does it honor God? Especially we're in front of a screen, or probably our thoughts. Put some guardrails to it. Especially for us married people. If you are facing this type of predicament, or in this phase, or probably you're like David, all along you thought, I could have escaped and made the device that plan. And now, I'm okay. Hindi nakalimutan na ni Lord. God's justice will still be there. But it's not too late, mga kapatid. We need to make better decisions so that we don't have any regrets. In this book by Andy Stanley, I haven't finished, but I was reading through. It says, your decisions determine your story, the story of your life. Our decisions determine the direction and quality of our lives. Every decision becomes a permanent part of our stories. That being the case, we should stop at every decision-making juncture and consider the story we want to tell. If David could have stopped at every given decision at that juncture, right? I don't want to join my army. Stop. Why? If something is critical also in our lives, and there's a decision factor that comes in, we need to challenge the norm. Why are we doing this? Hindi po masama yan. Even when we're alone, we challenge ourselves. If with this decision going right, looking both ways, should I have, if I do this, will I regret? Or will I do this, will I enjoy? If I didn't look, I can still look at the palace, but if I didn't accept that unpleasant thoughts, that decision could have made the story. Now, David is blotted with this story. How about us, mga kapatid? What do you want people to tell about your story? What's your story of your life? We may have come to a predicament that we have been not as similar as David probably, but we have come to a point that we are in that indecision, in that juncture, and we have crossed the rails, crossed overboard. And at one instance in our lives, all along we thought we escape it. And there's one thought. At the end of the day, mga kapatid, do not compromise. Do not compromise your time being alone in such a manner that you would be enticed to sin. Right? With the advent of media at this point in time, where almost like infidelity is like what? It's just a revenge because the guy was bad. It's almost like being accepted as a norm. Don't lose your convictions, especially the essentials of your faith. The gospel that has been taught to you. Do not compromise. Your youthful purity. Let alone your time together. Make sure that it honors God.